Hi, welcome to your pre-work on Book 1 of the Aeneid. And this is on page 18 of your booklets. So if you want to turn to page 18, then you'll be able to start filling out the key events box. And we're just going to go through the key characters, firstly, in Book 1 who take part in the events of Book 1. So firstly, we have the anger of Juno. And Juno, as you may know already, is implacably opposed to the Trojans. She's bitter for a couple of reasons. Firstly, she's very bitter about the fact that she took part in a beauty contest, which was judged by Paris, the Prince of Troy, and Paris didn't give her first prize, so she hates the Trojans as a result. In addition, she's got a favourite city, and that favourite city is Carthage. And the Carthaginians will eventually be destroyed by the Romans. And who is it? Who is founding Rome? Oh, yes, friends, it's Aeneas. And that's where we're going to see the basis of her hatred. So rather like Poseidon, who pursued Odysseus with relentless malice, she pursues Aeneas full of bitter resentment. And there's the anger of Juno for you. On the other side, we've got the compassion of Venus. Venus is a goddess, and she is the mother of Aeneas. And as a result, she's very, very keen to try and look after Aeneas the whole time. She makes a plea to Jupiter to look after the Trojans when they're being attacked by the storm in Book 1. And in addition, she pitches up when Aeneas is wandering around on the land just outside Carthage, and she smuggles him into the city in a mist to protect him so that he can come in safely. We've also got the all-powerful Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is the god who defines and decides fate. Once he's spoken, everything is then fixed. So he's like the arbiter, and he sits between Juno and Venus. And he's the one to whom everybody appeals if they want sort of divine justice. Once he's fixed fate, then that's it. The gods and mortals are controlled by fate. Fate must take place. Having said that, the speed at which it takes place may be different. But Jupiter's the one who has set all this sort of stuff. He then, in Book 1, makes a great prophecy where he announces the future founding of Rome and its future glory. So it's going to be fixed by fate. On to the mortals, and we have Aeneas firstly, who often has the epithet dutiful given to him. He is dutiful Aeneas. He's the leader of the Trojans, and he is the one who shows the sort of the compassion and the care for his crew and for the fleeing Trojans. In addition, he's particularly worried about his son Anchises. And so in those two incidents, he demonstrates two important Roman qualities. One is the pater patriae, which means father of the nation. The other is the pater familias, which means father of the family. Those two father roles are very important. He meets the other key mortal of Book 1, who is Dido, and Dido welcomes him to Carthage. This is a little bit of an unexpected thing, of course, but even though he appears in the middle of her midst, there's been a little bit of a overlap between the two of them. So firstly, she too knows what it's like to be a recent widow. Aeneas has just had his wife killed. Dido had her husband killed by her brother, and she's had to flee to the area which is now Carthage. So she's got a sort of fellow feeling for the Trojans. She's sympathetic. She's the beautiful queen. She is described as being like Diana, who is the goddess of the hunt and also the goddess of virginity. So there's a couple of interesting little things that we'll come back to when we watch the unfolding relationship between Aeneas and Dido. There is, too, the legacy of Troy. Now, like the story of the wooden horse in the Odyssey, the story of Troy has already spread its way to Carthage. In fact, the Carthaginians have been carving scenes from the Trojan War on some bronze gates that they've put on their temple. And so when Aeneas sees this, he realizes that he's likely to receive a welcome there. In fact, he even sees a carving of himself in the sack of Troy. And so he's given hope as a result. But at the same time, there's going to be danger in book one, the first start of the potential disastrous relationship between Dido and Aeneas. Venus is always worried about Juno. She suspects that Juno at some point is going to try and turn the Carthaginians against the Trojans, and perhaps Aeneas and all of his followers will be killed. So she cooks up this plan where she's going to get Dido to fall in love with Aeneas, and that will protect him, and it will stop Juno doing anything against the Trojans. So she sends Cupid, disguising him as Aeneas' son, and Cupid breathes into Dido love, and she drinks long draughts of love, ultimately dooming herself. So what I'd like you to do now is pause this video and look up a line reference to illustrate each of those 7 things. Have you paused? You need to pause. And hopefully you found 7 examples which you put in. We're just going to move on to have a little look at the Roman context. There's 2 passages for the Roman context. Firstly, book 1, line 148. Guess who this is talking about? As when disorder arises among the people of a great city, and the common mob runs riot, wild passions find weapons for men's hands, and torches and rocks start flying, at such a time, if people chance to see a man who has some weight among them for his goodness and his services to the state, they fall silent, standing and listening with all their attention while his words command their passions and soothe their hearts. You're right, it isn't necessarily one of our lessons where you all listen carefully to anything I say. It's actually Augustus, isn't it? And this simile is about Neptune calming the storm, but it's also about Augustus calming Rome after the Civil War. And the second passage is lines 258 to 295, that prophecy of Jupiter, which we talked about before. He prophesies the descent from Aeneas through his son Anchises down to Julius Caesar and ultimately Augustus. So what I'd like you to do now is to have a look at those 2 passages and jot down the details of them. After you've done that, we're going to move on. So you can pause the video. Now that you're back, you did some homework on pages 20 to 22 where you've learnt about Virgil's style and his narrative techniques. This is basically stylistically different from the Odyssey, isn't it? Homer is a bard, and so his work is oral poetry. It's much more rambling and open. Virgil is a written poet, so he's much more precise and careful in his language. So you should add in some details from there. Once you finish that, then we're going to be looking at character developments in the lesson, and we're going to be having a focus on Dido and Aeneas. So this is going to be where you'll fill in your character development, so you can leave this until the lesson. So there you go, book 1, summarised, hopefully helpful, and we shall carry on with this with book 2.